Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation on Shamed. Joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Long Island, Solomon Shaker Day School, Long Island, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky, Anshe Chesed in New York City, but on sabbatical, but still with us, dedicated to the Parsha Talk. And what a Parsha Talk we have. We're going to talk about Parshat Vayikra, which is an amazing parsha. We're going to talk about the maftir of this week, Shabbat Zachor, and we're going to do a little game. We're going to surprise everybody. Little game for Purim, thinking about Purim and its significance. But first, let's go into Vayikra, the hardest book in the Torah. Proposition, argue, yes, hardest. Do you agree that it's the hardest?
Most alien to contemporary religious life, but beautiful in its way. When we get into Parshat Kedoshim, certainly very deep, but I think that there's, real beauty and art to the sacrificial system, even though I don't really want to practice it in contemporary life. Nobody scares me more than the people, who literally like the underground from the 80s, and these folks still exist, who are trying to blow up the mosque and have reinstitute animal sacrifices. I think that's the worst thing I can imagine. But when you read the text, this is what we've done for centuries: read the text, learn the text, and that will sort of fill the gap of not performing the sacrifices.
So for the rabbis, this was the key book of the Torah. This is the one that they thought should be taught first to the little kids. And I think that the message for us, notwithstanding Jeremy's comment, but the augmented perhaps, is that, there are lots of ways to be a mensch, a good person. And we could compare Christian ethics, Muslim ethics, Jewish ethics, and there are some significant differences, but overall, each of the three major monotheistic religions of the West want us to be good people. What distinguishes us as Jews in the Bible was the sacrificial cult. That was unique to Judaism in the permutations that are recorded in the Torah. And one thing that distinguishes us today are our rituals. So we could take that lesson and apply it to our Jewish life today and look for ways that we can be distinct, because we don't always want to be like Mike or like anyone else or everyone else. We want to be unique.
So I want to approach this and say that there's obviously something very, very deep about the sacrificial system. Otherwise, it wouldn't have sustained itself for the hundreds of years that it did, from the construction of the first temple to its destruction, and then the reinstitution of the reconstruction of the second temple all the way through its destruction in the year 70. So we're talking about close to 1,500 years of a sacrificial cult. The first temple, 1000 BC to 586, and then 517 to 70. So you're looking at maybe 1,200 years where this is the way that religion is done. So it must have captured the imagination of people, and I think that there's so many elements to it, including the element of life and death, the element of spectacle, the element of public and private, the element that we can start with, which is the human desire that to come close to God and to not be rejected by God. So the verse is, Adam ki yakriv mikem korban. And we always note that it says Adam, human being, Adam, hearkening back to Breshit Adam, ki yakriv, who brings forward a korban, we call sacrifice korban, and the root of korban is karov, and that's pretty clear that it's the process of coming close. And in the process of coming close, your biggest worry is whether or not you're going to be accepted. And that's the drama that's unfolding in the sacrificial ritual, which I think is why it's so powerful. It's because all you want is to be accepted. All the human, if you enter into the system, all you want as a worshiping Jew is to know that God is accepting you, because the biggest anxiety or trauma that you have is to be rejected. And where do we see that trauma? We saw it from the beginning, at the beginning of the Bible. When Cain brings his sacrifice, God doesn't pay attention to him. Abel brings a sacrifice, God pays attention. It's as if God accepts it, but I think the precise interpretation is God pays attention to it. And when God pays attention to something, and God ignores something else, you don't want to be the person that God is ignoring. And that's a trauma. And we're living with that trauma, right? That's how I see the structure of the sacrifices playing out a deeply human story, together with its spectacle, with the song, with the blood, with the smoke, with the fire, with everything. I mean, I make a big picture out of it. I don't know if you want to react to that, or how you react to that. Because, we all have different interpretations of what does this represent. So you're thinking, we talked a little before about this, but does the animal represent the person, or does the animal represent some kind of gift in the cycle of giving?
But I think that's a bit of a false, distinction, because I think that it is a gift, and it is about creating this relationship between the giver and the gift with the recipient, the divine recipient. I do think that the gifts represent the person, the whole blood system, the putting the hands on the sacrifice. In my religious life, also in the sort of Nachmanidean tradition of Judaism, the more mystical-oriented, mythical-oriented, the only real gift that you give God is your life, is yourself. And of course, we don't, kill ourselves. We have God as a God of life, who wants more life, wants more mitzvot, wants more good action, wants more refinement as a person. But you offer your whole self in the way of this animal. But it is the gift. It is the gift that brings you close, as you said, karov. Yakriv mikem korban, the kuf resh bet root, which is karov. I also think that the English word, a lot of times people will make the observation that, sacrifice is a bad word because it means like what you lose or give up, and korban is a better word because it means you draw near. I actually think the English word sacrifice is perfect because the root means sacred. It's the thing that you make sacred. And there's a good Hebrew word for that, which is hekdesh. You devote something to the kodesh, you devote something to the sacred, and it creates this opportunity for the person who offers the gift to enter the realm of what is sacred, what's not ordinary, but what's uniquely special.
It's hard for me to come closer, the karev, to that interpretation. Only I'm really sticking to the lexicography here, to the word, and I really, in reading this, I want to make that imaginative leap and say, okay. And I just saw the movie, this Israeli movie called Agadat Kurban, which is, depicts scenes of sacrifice in a kind of animated way, and if you enter into the scene and you are the worshiper and you are bringing in your sheep or your animal, and you are witnessing this, you're witnessing the noise and the silence and the slaughter and the blood and the smoke and the smell, and it completely envelops your senses. It's very powerful. I don't think that makes the last experience that I would have there would be a feeling of sacred. I would have a feeling of it's overwhelming. It's beyond explanation. If it were not for the fact that it could become so regular and routine as to become somewhat meaningless over time, and that's the crisis that happened with it. Barry, you want to?
So I'm struck though by one of your comments. When we think back to the Gettysburg Address,
Yeah,
President Lincoln referred to the scene before him, which was going to become a national cemetery, as sacred space.
yeah.
And unlike most cemeteries where people are brought, this was a battlefield cemetery. This was filled with blood. And yet for Lincoln, and I think for those who were gathered there, it was a sacred space. And
What
I
made
don't
it
know that,
sacred?
I think that what made it sacred was the spilling of blood
Yes.
for a great purpose. And certainly what Lincoln understood to be the great purpose, which was the salvation of the Union. But I think that the spilling of blood in and of itself can create a dimension of holiness that not having blood spilled does not necessarily do. That the great drama of the sacrifice has to do with blood. And the Kohanim take over indisputably when the blood is going to be sprinkled on the altar, or for some sacrifices on the curtain separating the Kodesh or the Kodeshim, are brought into the holy space, because blood commands our attention.
Yes.
And the word that occurs to me is that sacrifice is theater, and theater requires attention and intention or concentration. I was reminded that a lot of us, especially in the days of COVID, we spend a lot more time watching TV or movies at home, and it's sometimes hard to pay attention. I think when you're in the live theater, you have a much easier time paying attention. It's a lot harder to lose your concentration. And that is what made the sacrifice, is that it was live theater.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I mean, and I would use the word spectacle, as a kind of, synonymous with what you're saying. It's, you are standing there and watching this, and of course, blood has more than one meaning to it, and blood belongs to God. Blood is life. And so what the spectacle, the drama or the theater of this is, that you are concentrating the drama of life and death right in front of you. You have power, the ultimate power over a creature. It's as if you are channeling that ultimate power, not against a human, but you're channeling it to a victim, a sacrificial victim. That victim is getting slaughtered. The blood, which belongs to God and represents life, is then going to the base of all life that sustains the world, which is what in the temple mythology, in the sanctuary idea, is that this is what's going to sustain the world, because this is what we are giving back to God, and therefore soliciting through our action God's attention to us. And I used to be very, not squeamish about it, but we get to Vayikra and think, oh God, can't wait till like Parshat Kedoshim, okay? At least, chapter 19 of the book of Leviticus, we can talk about, things that are real to us, and loving your neighbor, and not cheating, and not stealing, and not telling tales about your and living an ethical life within society. That's what chapter 19 is about in the Holiness Code. But just, take that imaginative leap and say, wait a minute, this captivated everyone's imagination. This was the focal point of everyone's life. You have to appear 3 times a year, and you can't appear empty-handed. And if you had something that you needed to give, you get. And we based, a whole story in, that's a foundational story on an olah, a sacrifice, a pure burnt offering that actually didn't go the way it was supposed to go. And actually, if I'm reading it closely and thinking, yeah, Abraham never intended it to go. We can talk about that next year when we get to Parashat Vayikra again. But what God asks of him, which is the impossible ask of sacrificing, his son as a burnt offering, it was never going to happen. We could never be a religion based on that. And so we had to find a way to take the power of this and to transform it. And I enter this, with humility, trepidation, awe, and trembling, to think that here we have the literature of it, and the literature cleans it, sanitizes it, sacralizes it, but it's everything. Everything.
Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, we can talk about it in Parshat Shmini too, by the way, when we get another couple of Nadav and Avihu and their sacrifice. But I want to, you related that through the prism of the book of Deuteronomy, which is that there's one temple, and it's like ultimately Jerusalem, and everyone has to come 3 times a year. But as we look at the Bible as a compound text, not a single univocal text, one thing that you'll notice in the book of Vayikra is the book of Vayikra never says there's only one altar. That's the main theme of Deuteronomy. He says it over and over again. Don't sacrifice in your local altars. Only come to the place where I will cause my name to dwell. It's the one place, and that's like a main theme of Devarim, is that it doesn't trust what apparently was the previous system, which is that there were lots of local altars, and there's plenty of evidence throughout the Tanakh that everybody had local altars.
Yeah.
And so when Vayikra comes along here, and I think it's like, this is a matter of academic argument about what's earlier, what's later. I think that one thing that it seems relatively clear to me, at least, is that Deuteronomy is centralizing something that was in Vayikra decentralized. And so I'm going to take a stab and say that Vayikra represents a time in Israelite history when there were lots of local altars. And so Adam ki akriv mikem korban, person offers a sacrifice, doesn't necessarily mean they're at this mega temple in Jerusalem. It might be there at their local altar, and they might be with their neighbors, and it involves food. Food to God in the form of the korban, food to the kohen in the form of, certain portions of the animal that the kohen gets as kind of payment for doing the work, but food for the family as well. The people ate the korban.
So you're referring to something that's on the menu of the korbanot, the zevach shlamim, which is
zevach shlamim,
festival offering, a feastal offering.
So I want to ask you, Rabbi Malamed, who we happen to know that you are, and for quite a few years, a vegan.
Yeah.
And so your enthusiasm for this as a religious theme, and knowing that it was a part of people's like gustatory lives too, their nutritional lives, like how react to that.
I'll tell you how. So for psychologists watching this, they can see my enthusiasm is the sublimation of all of the desire by not eating meat. I'm absolutely fascinated by it. I watch these videos about this, especially this wilderness cooking. I'm fascinated by it because it captivates the primitive sense, and that our primitive origins, and we're talking only 100 years ago, when you actually took a chicken, or you took an animal to the shochet and you slaughtered it, and you may have looked the other way, but you were fascinated. You may have been fascinated. That's what you needed it to eat. I'm totally fascinated by it, and I'm not evangelical about veganism. I think I'm entitled to my mishigas. Okay, all right, fine. Let's talk about Shabbat Zachor, because we're heading into the halfway mark here. Okay. It's Zachor this week, Zachor because of Purim. We're remembering Zachor et asher asa lecha Amalek. Jeremy, what did they do to us?
So Amalek in Exodus, right after the crossing of the Red Sea, I guess that's chapter 17 there. Amalek attacks them without provocation, very cruelly. Joshua leads the battle. Moses is on top of the mountain, and whenever he gives the touchdown symbol, the Israelites win. And when his hands get heavy and he falls down, the Gavar Amalek, and then Amalek starts to prevail. And so through the day, Joshua finally wins the battle. And there, Yad al Kesiyah, God, Moses says that God takes a vow by the divine throne, Milchama Ladonai ba'Amalek midor dor. God will always be struggling with this wicked people. Over time, it comes to mean not just one ethnic group of all the various ites that one reads in the Bible, the Girgashites and the Hivites and the Prizzites and the whateverites. Amalek comes not to mean just one ethnic group. They come symbolized as like the kind of cosmic evil-doing adversaries. And so in Deuteronomy now, chapter 25, there is a mitzvah in Parshat Ki Tetzeh, it'll be, that says, Zachor et asher asa lecha Amalek, remember what Amalek did to you, blot them out, don't forget. And there's this kind of paradoxical moment where you have to always remember to erase. You can't forget to erase, but if you erase the memory of Amalek, then you won't ever forget. I mean, you won't ever remember if they're fully erased. So it's like this kind of, what would you say, paradoxical. You always have to remember to blot out the indelible stain of wickedness or something like that. And it comes up on Purim because the king of Amalek in the battle, 1 Samuel chapter 15 with Saul, is Agag. His name is Agag, and Haman, the Purim story, is called Ha'agagi. So we have this kind of parallelism that in the run up to Purim, that story of evil out of control, even if it's kind of a comic story, it's a very threatening evil out of control. And you're supposed to remember that you have to, as Jewish people, you have to never, ever, ever slacken in your remembrance that evil, cruelty, wickedness does exist in the world, and you gotta fight back.
Nechama l'Adonai ba'Amalek midor dor, and we understand this as an eternal plight. And don't want to sound too not cynical but dark here. It's like wherever there are Jews, there are going to be anti-Semites. It's just a feature of being a Jew, and there's compelling midrashim and interpretation that anti-Semitism preceded the Jewish people, and anti-Semitism will never succeed, because with Jewish people are eternal, but it will always be coterminal because of what Judaism represents, which is to be witness to one God in the world. Barry, you have a
Yeah, we have a counterpoint to the Amalek story, which is the entrance into the promised land. At least in terms of the Bible, once we get there, we're supposed to stay there forever. With Amalek, as you suggested, it requires eternal vigilance because, as Jeremy rightly noted, the battle with evil is never done. We may have victories on the battlefield, but the war is never over.
okay.
And it requires vigilance and diligence. And I think we need to also connect it with Pesach. I mean, part of the reason why we're doing this is one of the 4 special Shabbatot before Pesach, is that it's a harbinger of the great redemption. And it's a reminder that even though Pesach is often portrayed as a God-driven redemption, all redemption requires the people and their intention to be redeemed. It's not something that is completely delivered by God and happens to us by happenstance.
All right. So we also are recording this the week before Purim. This is Shabbat before Purim. We won't be with you till after Purim. So we have a little game here. This game is a game of dice. The game of dice includes one die is for the chapter and one die is for the verse. And we're going to do chapter and verse, and we're going to pick verses out of the book of Esther. The dice on your right is the number of chapters, and the die on your left is the verse. Here we go. Barry's going to start. Chapter 10, verse 12. I don't think that's a verse.
There are only 3 verses in chapter 10.
Good again. Chapter 3, verse 19. Chapter 3, verse 19 in the book of Esther is as follows. There's no chapter 19. Chapter 3, verse 12. Okay, here we go. Vayikaru sofrei Amalek b'chodesh harishon b'shlosha asar yom bo vayikatev k'chol asher tziva Haman. I'll translate. And the scribes of the king wrote down on the first month on the 13th day, they wrote down everything that Haman had commanded to all of the satraps and the courtiers from every single province and every single ethnic group. Am kil shano, every single nation to their language. B'shem hamelech Achashverosh nichtav v'nechtam b'tabat hamelech. It was spoken in the name of the king and sealed with the ring of the king. Okay, want to take that on?
So I think what we can take from this verse is that writing is very important in the Megillah.
Absolutely.
That it's not just here that what Haman has ordered is written down. There is the writing down that will feature in the revelation of Mordechai's greatness, Achashverosh, where something was recorded in the Chronicles about what Mordechai had done on behalf of the king, and the king had ignored it. And also the Megillah itself is written down. And, at the end of the book, if there had been a verse 19 in chapter 10, that would have recorded something about how the Megillah was sent to all the lands. And writing is something that gives an element of purpose, but also of permanence.
Absolutely.
And I think that's key to the book of Esther.
Sealing also. Cool. Okay, second verse. Here we go. We're going to put Rabbi Jeremy Komanovsky up, rolling the dice. I have the prerogative here. Chapter 8, verse 4. Chapter 8, verse 4.
All right, what do we have here? Oh, no. Okay. You can read it.
Chapter 8, verse 4. Vayo- Vayoshet Amalek leEsther et Sharvita Zahav. The king took his royal golden scepter and extended it towards Esther. Vatakom Esther. She got up. Vata'amod lifnei Amalek, and she stood.
No.
Okay, you have to explain what Lashon Naki is.
Well,
Okay.
no, it's
No, it's not Vatakom Esther Vata'amod lifnei Amalek. It's Vayakom Hamelech Vayamod.
should I do another verse?
No, we can do this
Go ahead.
Okay. So Esther is a sex farce. Okay. The king gets mad at the wife. He has a beauty pageant for all of the virgins of the kingdom, of 127 kingdoms. And when they have their tryouts, they go to the palace at the night and they come back the next morning. Okay. And so this is a book filled with a lot of dirty humor. And part of the dirty humor is that when Esther sees the king, repeatedly, he extends the golden scepter. Okay.
As it were.
So, as it were. And first of all, you gotta like the fact that in the entire library that is the Tanakh, not everything has such a stern face. Not everything has such a solemn look. Some of it is just dirty jokes. And in the whole library of the Jewish people, that's okay. Purim is carnival. All the world's nations have Mardi Gras. All the world's nations have Carnival. All the world's nations have St. Patty's Day. This year, Purim comes out on St. Patty's Day. And this is our St. Patty's Day too. And it involves revelry and it involves a little bit of bawdy humor. And that was one of them.
I
So
want to
you're
just do it.
suggesting that, unlike Groucho Marx, who said sometimes the cigar is just a cigar, here the scepter might be something else.
The Golden Scepter is never just
So-
the Golden
So as
Scepter.
usual, I want to get more serious about this and say that it actually was dangerous for Esther to enter into the king's private chambers, and that these gestures, which have all these overtones to it, also include the danger, and that's where this book is. This book is always edging towards that world of danger. Okay, my turn. Rolling the I gotta share the screen here so everybody, our viewers, can see. Rolling the dice here,
So you're not
and it's
cheating,
chapter
yeah.
7, verse 16. Chapter 7, verse 16. We will find
No,
it
doesn't exist.
doesn't exist. We got to do it again. Okay, here we go. Share the screen. Boom. Chapter 9, verse 7. Find it for me while I do this.
Okay, I have it.
Go ahead,
I
read.
have it. Oh, okay. So this is good. I'll read a few more than this is part of the complicated stuff here. So after the Jews take vengeance on their enemies, the verse 6, "Uvashushan habira hargu haYehudim ve'abed 500 ish." The Jews killed 500 people in Shushan, the capital. And here's verse 7, "Ve'et parshandata ve'et alfon ve'et aspata ve'et porata ve'et adai ve'et aridata ve'et parmashta ve'et arisai ve'et aridai ve'vaizata aseret b'nei Haman ben Hamdata tzorer haYehudim hargu uvavizat lo shalchu et yadam." They kill all of those 10 names, those funny names of Haman's 10 sons, but they did not steal their property.
So what I want, my reaction to this on a snap of fingers is, look at this. This is a way that they are trying to eradicate evil, and it's not an accident that there are 10 sons of Haman, and that 10 functions in Judaism certainly as a symbolic number. I mean, we don't have the system of the minyan already in the book of Esther, but this is the complete antithesis to the sacred community, a community of evil that is completely eradicated. And the custom of reciting these names is you do it all in one breath. The reader is supposed to not indulge in this. We're not supposed to give them any kind of honor by reading them with a kind of the verbal enjoyment of the polysyllabic nature of their names. Those of us who enjoy the sonorous nature of language would enjoy reading multisyllabic names. and you don't get that enjoyment. It's the only thing you're not supposed to enjoy in Purim, is to say their names quickly. One breath, get it out. It's like vomiting them out. Peh! That's what I would say. This was fun. Feh. Should we do one more? Just one more for bonus. Okay, here we go.
Okay.
All right. We'll all react to one. Here we go. Chapter 3, verse 2. Chapter 3,
No,
verse
chapter
2.
2, verse 3.
Chapter 2, verse 3, I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, actually, 3 verse 2 is better.
Okay.
2 verse 3 is when after the king has gotten rid of Vashti, then what's his name, the Memuchan or whoever, says you should bring the beautiful virgins for the beauty pageant. But in 3 verse 2 is
verse 2.
V'chol avdei hamelech asher b'shar hamelech korim u'mishtachavim leHaman. Boo! All the king's courtiers knelt down and bowed low to Haman.
Yeah.
Ki chen sivalo hamelech, because that's what the king commanded. U'Mordechai lo yichra v'lo yishtachaveh.
Wow.
But Mordechai would not bow down to Haman.
That's the mark of a Jew. That's what makes Judaism Judaism. Judaism is it's like, what's the rabbinic text? Anyone who denies idolatry is a Jew.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't have the Hebrew on my tongue,
Yeah.
but it's it's the denial of idolatry, and that's what Mordechai, and it's defiance, and it's such a courageous moment. What a moment! It is. Do I want to say it's the turning point in the book, or at least one of the great crisis moments in the book, where Mordechai says, "I am not going to do what everybody else does. I'm going to be defiant. I'm going to be true to who I am, and not bow down, because in giving him any kind of respect, it's validating the evil that he represents."
By the way, it's chapter, it's Masechet Megillah, chapter, page 13. Kol hakofer be'avodah zarah nikra Yehudi.
There you go.
Whoever, that's a great comment. Whoever denies idolatry is known as a Jew.
Really, yeah. And it doesn't have halachic weight, but it ought to have, this strong allegorical existential weight.
Well, I actually think that when Maimonides, who of course is unique in Jewish history insofar as he wants, like, quote unquote proper theology, not just proper behavior. When Maimonides has the ikarim, the principles, and he says the outrageous thing, which didn't take through history, thankfully, which is that literally, if you violate one of the ikarim, you're not a Jew.
Yeah.
But he's got this teaching in mind, that what he takes to be correct theology is the denial of avodah zarah. And if you have the wrong theology and you think God has a body, or you think, whatever wrong thing one would say about God, you're literally not a Jew. So you have to deny the wrong theology if you're going to actually be a Jew.
Wow. Okay. Last words, Barry.
I'm gonna pass today.
Here, pass, because we're entering into this world of joy and also trauma and challenge. That's where the world is right now. We can't end this Parsha talk without thinking about our brothers and sisters in Ukraine and all of humanity now, the world, which is,
and our fellow Jew, Vladimir Zelensky,
really at the edge of danger and in danger, with all the horrific things that are happening, the bombings, the killings that are happening. We are with
So we might say that today we too, like Mordechai, must stand up.
Absolutely. May the merciful one bless our brothers and sisters who are facing danger and take them out of darkness to light. And may we all be able to merit the joy in Purim. La Yudim haita ora v'simcha. As we say at the end of the Megillah, that the Jews had great light and great joy. May we all be able to celebrate Purim in that joy. And so here we are at the end of our Parsha talk, Parsha Vayikra, Shabbat, Zachor, a little bit of random verse generation here, the first time on the Parsha talk, with merch coming Shabbat Shalom. Happy Purim.
Shabbat Shalom, Purim Sameah.
Take care.